Hello, everybody, to another interview as part of the pop-up outreach activities. We have the pleasure to discuss with Thomas Arnold, who's an advisor for Sustainable Development Goals to the Directorate General of Research and Innovation at the European Commission. And we are going to talk about naive innovation policies, which is definitely a very open frame. And we're going to see how we're going to fill in whatever is related to this topic in this interview. But before we start, Mr. Arnold, I would like to ask you to give us a little bit information on your background, on your role at DG RTD, and what your overall policy philosophy is.
So I have been for many years advisor for the sustainable bioeconomy. I've now 2 years ago become advisor for sustainable development goals in DG research and innovation. And maybe just this could interest other organizations, our setup. We have 2 years ago rearranged the whole directorate to fit it with the wedding cake picture of sustainable development, where you have the 3 layers: the planet, the people, and the prosperity. And we have now directorates since then for healthy planet, for clean planet, for people prosperity, and some other directorates. And we have a central role inside the Commission to enable overall the transformative policy agenda of Ursula von der Leyen, be it the Green Deal, but be it also the other headline ambitions, because the Green Deal is just one of 6 headline ambitions. The others are Europe fit for the digital age, an economy that works for people, a stronger Europe in the world, promoting our European way of life, and the new push for European democracy. They are all together. And we consider that research and innovation has a central role to make all of this happen successfully and to contribute substantially to provide solutions, but also to provide, to a certain extent, a compass on how to move forward.
And what was the motivation to really put the sustainable development goals at the heart of the organization and of the restructuration of the Directorate General?
As this happened, it was a time where the United Nations 230 agenda, which by the way has as a title "Transforming Our World," had been adopted relatively recently, where you've had IPCC reports, where you've had the 1.5 degree report, when a lot of science also came together, just to underline that we have a major all-encompassing planetary emergency with everything linked, and that to enact big sustainability transformations is really the defining task of our generation. And I think DG Research and Innovation is also in this context. See how innovations can be leveraged, how new solutions can be developed. They can be technological, but not only, they have to be systemic. And how we can contribute to make this world a better world. Maybe some words on this all-encompassing planetary emergency. All dimensions are interrelated: climate change, biodiversity loss, resource overuse, the health crisis, the social crisis, and the systemic perspective is important for succeeding the big sustainability transformations. And I can link this nicely to the discussion that you had last week with the other experts. The planetary emergency has become our biggest market failure. And this market failure destroys our life, prosperity supporting ecosystems, and threatens the survival of human civilization in its current form. This is very explicit and increasingly explicit in recent science. Just a month ago, there has been an article by Rockström and others, Our Future in the Anthropocene Biosphere. And they say, I quote, taken together, human actions are challenging the biosphere foundation for prosperous development of civilizations. And you probably know there are also numerous reports, including from major reinsurance companies, on risk and costs of the different dimensions of the planetary emergency. Then, as we are in a COVID crisis, just to highlight one report from the IPBES, which is the equivalent of the IPCC for biodiversity and ecosystems. They've issued a pandemics report in 2020 where they say, where they highlight that pandemics are linked to the destruction of nature, and where they alert that future pandemics, they may emerge more often, spread more rapidly, do more damage to the world economy, and kill more people than COVID-19. So we shouldn't believe we are just now in one single event. If we are not fundamentally changing, then this may become the new normal. Just think about the thawing permafrost, which is a reservoir of ancient diseases that could be released and combined with existing bacteria and viruses. We are seeing the destructive potential of climate change today with 1.1 or 1.3 degrees warming, extreme weather events with floods and wildfires. Think of California, think of Australia, think of Southern Europe, think of Sweden, the melting of glaciers, impacts on the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people. And just to remind, the goal of the Paris Agreement is not to limit global warming to 2%, to 2 degrees, sorry, but to well below 2 degrees, preferably to 1.5 degrees compared to pre-industrial levels. So sometimes there's a shortcut, Paris Agreement, 2 degrees. It's more ambitious than this. And the title of the 2030 United Nations Agenda for Sustainable Development is Transforming Our World. It brings together the different dimensions of sustainability, planet, people, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And the whole is more than the 17 individual goals.
So would you then classify the traditional policies we know from DG RTD, which aim to a large extent at raising competitiveness, raising economic growth? Is that a thing of the past? Is this completely out of date now, and you have already changed your organization to focus at the sustainable development goals? So where are you in this process?
Let's say it is rather a question. It's not an issue that the one replaces, abolishes the other. It is more a question of balance, a shift of focus. There may have been a tendency over a couple of decades to focus on issues like intellectual property, contributing to wealth creation through knowledge. This is still important because we still want to be a sustainability leader in the world. So we need solutions also which allow our companies to be competitive. But this is not the only focus. It cannot be the only focus any longer. It's also about how can we save the world? How can we save, how can we ensure the well-being of people? How can we contribute to a better world for all and not only for, so it's much wider.
Mm-hmm. So I can't hear you at the moment.
Sorry.
It's working again, I think.
Okay, sorry. I've had today several interruptions. So
You're gone again.
I don't know. Am I still with you?
Yes, now you are again with me.
Because I have a problem with a loudspeaker, but I don't know why. It
Okay.
changes all the time from the headset to the other loudspeaker. So I would say it's rather a question of shift and of a more wider consideration of a much wider agenda, including the ecological, societal, and economic transformation.
But is competitiveness of competitiveness of European companies still an issue? Because this was always one of the main goals of policy in Europe, also raising R&D expenditures, for example, or upkeeping a certain share of industry manufacturing in overall production. Is this line of thinking totally gone, or is this still an important pillar of your work?
No, it's not gone. And we have a treaty, and the treaty clearly sets out what are the objectives of research and innovation policy, that it contributes to the competitiveness of the European industry, but also to other policies. And the research and innovation chapter is part of the overall treaty setting where you have the basics. And the basics may have been a bit not forgotten, but less been in focus in the past. And look at Article 3. It says the aim of the EU is to promote peace, its values, and the well-being of its people. So this is for all policies, including for R and I policies. So I think it's not gone. Of course, we still need competitiveness, but it's to be seen, I would say, in a broader context.
Okay.
Of
your approach,
of the overall purpose of the European aim.
Okay, and how does your policies, your setup at the moment, fit in with the Green Deal that is now, I guess, the main guiding strategy for Europe up until 2030?
So the Green Deal, as I said already, is one of the 6 headline ambitions. But this being said, it's the one that comes first, and is probably a very dominant one. And the key ambition of the European Green Deal is for Europe to be the first climate neutral continent by becoming a modern resource efficient economy. So this is the stated objective. The European Green Deal provides an action plan to boost the efficient use of resources by moving to a clean, circular economy, restore biodiversity, and cut pollution. This is a quote from the Green Deal communication. And the Green Deal is an integral part of the Commission strategy to implement the SDGs and the United Nations agenda for sustainable development goals. And there you also see the link to sustainable development. So sustainable development SDGs is not something separate. So it's quite normal that we have this new setup, because this also supports fully the Green Deal. And the Green Deal introduces a set of deeply transformative policies. I think this is important. It's about changing our unsustainable systems for food, energy, transport, etc., which are very often wasteful, polluting, based on fossil resources. So this is a major ambition. It's a major endeavor to change this. But at the same time, this is our future. This is our future. And you've probably the well-balanced words of Ursula von der Leyen still in your mind when she presented to the European Parliament the Green Deal, saying this is our new growth strategy, but it is a growth strategy that gives back more than it takes, and it is a growth strategy that cares. So you see that there is also a shift of focus. This is no longer business as usual. And you have a really complex set of interrelated priorities and objectives, increasing the EU's climate ambition for 2030, 2050. supplying clean, affordable, secure energy, mobilizing industry for a clean and circular economy, building and renovating in an energy and resource efficient way, accelerating the shift to sustainable and smart mobility, from farm to fork, designing a fair, healthy, environmentally friendly food system, preserving and restoring ecosystems biodiversity, and a zero pollution ambition. So all those are somehow interlinked and make it very complex, because you need to take care that moving forward on one is not undoing or doing harm to any of the other objectives. And it is clear that you need a kind of a systemic approach to make this happen. And this is where transformative research and innovation policy kicks in. Not only to provide the solutions, many of which are technological, to make this happen, but also kind of the systemic glue to succeed the transformation. Because now, in addition to those interrelated objectives, you have also mainstreaming sustainability across other policies, like pursuing green finance and investment, ensuring a just transition, greening national budgets, sending the right price signals, of course, mobilizing research and innovation in itself, activating education and training, changing governments, having a better regulation tool based on large public consultation. All this requires a lot of research and innovation. And when we want to move out of what you call, what is the overall threat of your event, naive innovation policies, then I think we need to take into account the complexity of this whole of government approach. No longer to make policies within the silos, but trying to combine the silos or break the silos or making the silos dance. Okay, there are different expressions out there, and implementing this whole of government approach. There's been in December or in November 2020 a new staff working paper on sustainable development, which clearly sets out this whole of government approach of the EU to make to implement sustainable development goals and to succeed those deeply transformative policies. And it's clear that you need research and innovation as a crucial enabler for this whole of government approach and for those deeply disruptive policies. But this brings me back to your question. Are we now still looking at the objectives of competitiveness and so on? Yes, we do, of course. But I think this explains with only looking at single technological solutions, at incremental improvements, you cannot succeed this whole of government approach. This takes much more, and also a much more transformative innovation policy, which is systemic, which takes into account the complexity of wicked problems, where you also have different value systems intervening, disagreements. Okay, this comes out very clearly also from the discussions you had with the other expert, how many different views there are out there. And clearly one of the instruments that can address such wicked problems is transdisciplinary research. We are not only interdisciplinary, where you combine interdisciplinarity with the incorporation of different knowledge systems and also with co-creation with citizens. And implication of citizens in the not only in counting birds, but also in formulating the research questions and ensuring that what is researched is relevant. And there's a very nice, maybe I can quote this piece of work, which was done also in 2020 by the Club of Rome and systemic. It's called a system change compass, implementing the European Green Deal in a time of recovery, which sets out what is needed, redefining. So research and innovation is also about redefining leadership, redefining governance, redefining finance, redefining consumption, redefining incentives, redefining competitiveness. Yes, competitiveness, but competitiveness needs to be married with sustainability and lead to green solutions. Redefining the metrics. Is it still GDP or is it well-being? Is something else needed? Redefining progress. What is progress? Having ever more of material objects, having a better purpose in life. So all this are new questions. Redefining natural resource use. How can we develop nature positive solutions? Not only nature based, but nature positive solutions, where afterwards we have more than before, where we have a regenerative economy. And last not least, redefining prosperity. What does this mean in this new world? Ensuring prosperity for all. And this moves us far beyond a setting of STEM. Maybe for many years we focused on STEM. STEM is still important, is still very important, but you need more. You need all the disciplines. You need philosophy. You need the social sciences. You need much more. You need to open to many more actors than before. And to tackle those big challenges, the mission-oriented approach is really important. And you know, in Horizon Europe, we have a couple of those missions. They've sometimes been compared to moonshots, but maybe a moonshot is still a linear, something very linear. You shoot somebody on the moon and you get him back. This is more of an Earth shot. It is really addressing the need for complex change and for turning a tanker which is currently going into the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm.
Then,
if I may interrupt you, because there's so many topics are on the plate now, all the right topics, I think, but given that we have, it's a really short time up to 2030, I would say, if you want to change the economy and how we behave and what kind of standards we have, what kind of perceptions of growth or progress, how is it possible to make so many changes, so many complex changes in such a short period of time? For me, the central number of the Green Deal is the minus 55% of greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, that's a hard number. That's something to achieve. That's something where you also can ask whomsoever how they are going to contribute towards this goal. Yeah. So given that you have a very broad policy agenda, change agenda, how is that going to interlink? How are you going on such a broad basis to work towards this objective? And what are the mechanisms that are certain that you actually achieve it? Yeah, because we have also seen, I mean, I have been in policy consulting for 3 decades now, closely observing what is happening at the European level. We had a number of goals set for 2010 and 2020, which we didn't achieve. We always had a crisis just a year or two ahead of the deadline. Yeah, but actually, even without crisis, we wouldn't have been close to some of these goals. And so I'm always a bit worried if I hear so many ambitious, and I would say, of course, the right objectives, how they play out, how you're going to really manage to achieve what is written down in numbers in these bold agendas.
Now, the quest for simplicity in a complex world. This is a dilemma. I think for all of us. Companies, they love single KPIs. And okay, minus 55%, that's nice. But the problem is that if you look at the planetary boundaries framework, climate is just one of the planetary boundaries. Okay, this brings me back to my initial statements about the planetary emergency. You also have biodiversity loss. You have, and everything is reinforcing each other. And there has been a lot of activity, or there is currently ongoing a lot of activity to better define also indicators for nature, for biodiversity. So climate has a certain advance on nature, on biodiversity in the formulation of indicators and targets. But this doesn't mean that biodiversity, that nature is less important. And one of the big challenges will be precisely to get also a set of indicators, of clear policies for biodiversity, and also find ways how can we value nature much better than has happened so far. So unfortunately, it is this kind of complexity. And I don't think that just focusing on one, then that we can really achieve what we want to achieve. It's probably really focusing on all of them, and also taking into account the citizens' engagement and the behavior change. So just to give you one example, there's currently one action which is called the Climate Pact, which is really about engaging with citizens in regions and cities. How do we get towards behaviors, towards lifestyles, towards broad systemic change and societal transformation? And this has to happen. And it's not only the technologies, and it's also the culture. And you may know that there is now a new initiative which is seeing life, which is the new European Bauhaus, which brings also in the designers, the architects, the artists, culture, many more, even more approaches to move forward towards the goal of transforming our world. I think it's really this transformative ambition. It's more the compass that is important than the single indicator of the minus 55. If you only focus on minus 55, then probably we may fall short on the other objectives.
Actually, I didn't want to imply that we only try to achieve this objective, but this is one of the things we have to achieve, I would think. And if we achieve other objectives too, biodiversity is certainly an issue that should be very high on the agenda, no doubt about that. And you mentioned all other important issues too, but I think it is at the moment also something to be discussed is, do we have many goals at the same level? Do we have a hierarchy of goals we would like to achieve? Are there trade-offs? If there are trade-offs, which one is more important? Yeah, I think we are discussing this on a number of levels at the moment. For example, for the recovery plan, some countries or some observers just want to go back to normal, yeah, whatever they think normal is, to the pre-pandemic level or whatsoever, and they are fine if nothing else happens. We know that this is not going to be sufficient. We also know from the common agricultural policy, at least as it discussed now, and the financial framework for the agricultural policy is not really a game changer. It's more or less more of the same. Yeah? We have different headlines, I agree, and we have a lot of topics in Horizon Europe where you address biodiversity issues, but in substance, yeah, if it comes down to financing and what you are financing, it's more or less a continuation of what we are having at the moment. And given the contribution of agriculture and food to the emission of greenhouse gases, it's gonna blow up the Green Deal as far as I can see. Yeah? So what I'm questioning is, we have a lot of strategies, we are setting the right objectives, we are setting the right targets, but actually I don't see that transformed to real policies at the moment in the speed that would be needed to achieve the high-flying targets we have just discussed.
Sorry. Now, I don't think, again, we can isolate the climate. It's really, if we don't succeed all of the dimensions of the planetary emergency, we will fail on all of them. This is
So
unfortunately
everywhere. Is that what you are
an uncomfortable truth. Then, of course, we have resistance. We have resistance from those forces that are benefiting from an old system. So probably if the Green Deal is fully implemented, there will also be a profit drift to new actors. How can we, what can we offer, let's say, the coal regions in Poland? Can people become, can we focus on insulation of buildings? Can we, let's say there are many models out there, but of course there is resistance from many actors, including from governments against being ambitious. And now the recovery plans, okay, would be a great opportunity. But of course, you see the forces of business as usual. They're there. This is clear. So, but yet it has to be. It's a once in a century opportunity, the recovery, to build forward better. But how can this be made in a way that it is acceptable to the people? That you not have yellow West movements because you have environmental taxation, which primarily, because they tend to be regressive, penalize low-income people or people who depend on their old combustion engine car. Okay, this is difficult. So if you don't find solutions for taking along those people, then it will be difficult. So at least in the cities there are, and there's research from Oxford, for instance, that cycling, walking is 10 times as efficient as electric vehicles to move to clean, to net zero cities. And there is something where we could do a lot to have at the same time behavior change and also to have infrastructure which facilitates cycling and walking, which also promotes better health because it has other co-benefits. It can address the obesity problem and so on. It will have resistance, of course. In cities, yes, but in rural areas, you probably don't get away with individual mobility by car. In cities, you can have models where you replace ownership by shared mobility and shared cars. Even for autonomous driving, you would need a strong connectivity. Currently, not all rural areas are sufficiently connected. So
I think it's different depending on the car producer. I think Tesla doesn't need any connectivity to have autonomous driving cars. They are actually doing quite well with 2 cameras or 7 cameras to be more precise. But anyway, that's sidetracking the issue. But yes, my worry is that this is highly complex and that it's so complex that we have a lot of discussions. We have some losers, which are obviously benefiting from the present system. And we also have a lot of resistance from high-income people, which are also consuming a larger than average share of the environment, emitting more climate or greenhouse gases and so on. So we have clearly groups that are opposing such moves and which are in good positions to influence policy making and politicians. So this is difficult. The easier part, I think, is to compensating people that are harmed, low income groups that may be harmed by environmental legislation or taxation, because this has been a problem which has been known for a long time and should have been already on the agenda to compensate those groups that are really.
So the social dimension is really important.
Social dimension, but it's nothing new. It's that is something we have been discussing for quite some time. So the way forward, I've noticed already from what you said, you strongly think in missions if you design policies. Is that correct?
In missions, but also in an overall approach of building forward better. So we have an expert group who have now issued 2 ESI, it's called, and it's chaired by Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, who's the co-president of the Club of Rome. And they have issued a policy brief, Transformation Post-COVID, Mobilizing Innovation for People, Planet, Prosperity. And they have a protect, prepare, transform approach. So you need to protect. You need to protect certain populations. You need to prepare for the new things to come. But at the same time, you need to transform. You need to transform and build forward better. It's not building back only, it's also really going forward. It's not back to business as usual. It is about building forward better. And it won't be easy, it's clear.
Also, the track records of missions is not, I think, that positive. Yeah, we don't have seen very successful missions in recent years or decades. There seem, I mean, I really think that the mission orientation is something very positive. I like the idea to have horizontal policy intervention where you move out of silos, you cooperate across directorates generals, across ministries and whatsoever. We have been, at least in my career as a policy consultant, we have been advising to do this all the time, but actually it never materializes, and this, I mean, I hope that this is happening now, and we very much need it to have coordinated policy interventions. But I'm still skeptical to some extent. Is there anything you can do to take away that skepticism?
Now the Horizon missions, they're just they're being developed. They're being developed. There are mission boards. There are endeavors to include the citizens and take account of citizen co-creation in those missions. They take into account sustainable development. So I think it's now too early already now to judge on the Horizon Europe missions. So let it go for a couple of years and then see if it meets up to its ambition. But we are very serious in making this a success.
Yeah, I mean, my point would be that, as I already said, we only have 10 years to 2030. Yeah, we don't have a lot of time to get prepared to organize change and then implement it. Because if you just, I mean, it really takes a long time to change the system. If you want to change behavior, if you want to change culture, this is nothing you do in 1 or 2 years' time. And so you have to start early, you have to be prepared, you should have started 2 years ago or even longer before that, if we set such ambitious targets. Aren't you a bit afraid that we are going to miss these targets?
Of course, there's a risk that this is, that there has been ambition and no implementation. That's why implementation is really, ambition needs to be followed by implementation. This is very important. And you really need to, at the level of the strategic programming, now at the level of the individual projects, ensure that this delivers. But even this is not always easy, because it needs convincing many people. if you really want to have more transformative elements into the work programs. It also needs, if you want really a serious exercise, that you co-create this with other services, that you co-create this with citizens. This is a difficult and a complex endeavor, but I think we are up to facing those difficulties.
Actually, I have been involved in processes like this for more than 10 years now. And we have also come up with a platform where you can do it. And as far as I have observed, it's a fairly straightforward process to work with citizens. You get a lot back. We are just running a process here in Vienna, in the district of Vienna, where they are just discussing what should be changed. Yeah, and the problem is that they get more suggestions for change and well designed and well argumented proposals than they can chew. Basically, I mean, they have 1,500 people involved in that process. There are more than 400 suggestions already. And it's the policymakers, it's the administrations that struggle to deal with these issues. I guess if you do something like this at European level, you are flooded with proposals in case people take you serious, which is always the major issue. If they think they can have an impact on decision making, then they're going to contribute. But I think the major difficulty is not so much people and involving people, but then actually to get things done again, as we just discussed. Yeah. And also the European Union has been talking about this also for decades, that you want to have more participation. I've been a member to the Economic and Social Committee. We have been discussing this for years, but actually what you see is not a big change. And maybe it comes now. I would really be in favor of that, and that would be super. But I would like to see what is the next step. Where do you really make progress, and what is going to change the implementation once you started to do these participatory processes?
Okay, now we have our R&I days coming up. Maybe you want to join and also participate and learn a lot of how those issues move forward. You'll get a lot of information there.
Will do.
Then let's say how concretely the Climate Pact is now very active, and they have different ambassadors who have very interesting models of good practice which can be adapted to other circumstances. You have the Conference for the Future of Europe now coming up. There are many actors involved with this. You have many activities in cities. So don't only consider the EU. Don't just lay back in your armchair and say, now what will the EU do for Europe and the world? It's a little bit an endeavor of all of us. We all need to get involved into this process as citizens in different layers of administration or organization, be it civil society, be it cities. Cities are tremendous actors. Just to give you an example, one of the new economic models that is coming up, and I'm in a group looking at how the donut economics model can be adapted to Commission policy making, how this can influence this concept of the safe and just operating space, how can this influence, impact our policies. And a lot is going on city level. Kate Rayworth has done a fantastic job. You may be aware of the Amsterdam donut, and yes, where really in a participatory mode with citizens, it has been broken down to the city level. What does it mean for the city of Amsterdam to implement the local social, the local environmental, but also to take account of the impacts, the global social and the global environmental impacts of the actions of the city of Amsterdam and its citizens. It's tremendous work which is being done. Now Brussels also has started a city donut, and It will be presented at the upcoming RNI days. So it's just an example of the many initiatives that go on. And it's more or less also creating an ecosystem that favors such initiatives, that gives leeway. And then you are in the area again of governance innovation. So it's not a bullet ex machina solutions coming out of DG Research and Innovation or out of the Commission, but it's really a common endeavor of we all are Europe. So let's occupy Europe. Let's make it happen. Let's make the Green Deal. Let's make the Green Deal ours. Maybe this is also a message that is important. And then, of course, you get the question: how can you develop ownership? How can people be enthusiastic about the Green Deal? How can people have hope about what's going on? And I would not underestimate those dimensions. I would not underestimate. All of this is more important than a group of experts somewhere sitting in Borchette or Charlemagne, or now visual through the Zoom, and looking at single indicators. I think it's really make the change happen.
I mean, the issue with single indicators is they can be important and they can be just single indicators. Yeah. But I was stressing this minus 55% greenhouse gases because I think this is one of the most central indicators that we should be looking at all the time, and where we should measure progress towards this objective all the time.
Of course.
Be able to readjust policies, measures, whatsoever to achieve it, almost at all costs, I would say. Yeah. Because if we are not able to save the planet, or also biodiversity, also, of course, inequalities, in wealth and income. I would fully agree that this should also be on the agenda. But if we are not able to solve these central issues, then then we really failed. Yeah, and these next 10 years, I think are really important in this respect.
Exactly.
I mean,
the upcoming decade is as important as it's really a generational challenge for this decade. And it's also, okay, we are working a lot with stakeholders. Stakeholders, they hold the stake. They also they're interested in an issue, but sometimes they're also interested in an issue staying as it is. Maybe we need to identify the stake movers. Who are the stake movers? Who are the ones that are advancing? Who are the unusual alliances? Get them into a room, orchestrate conversations, get the young people talk with the reinsurance companies, get those unusual alliances and bridges being built. And then out of this, let's say the hive intelligence of those conversations, maybe then 1,000 solutions are coming up. In addition to the Bertrand Piccard 1,000 solutions, you probably know the Solar Impulse Foundation now has finalized the 1,000 solutions, how you can profitably protect, save the climate and protect the environment. This is tremendously important, but it's not sufficient. We need much, much, much more.
I mean, we to some extent, the way we are running the discussion here in the project, in the pop-up hub, is a bit, I think, different than how you are addressing policy issues. We are looking to some extent also to very simple solutions that solve a lot of problems. Yeah, and one of these solutions would be a carbon tax that really changes incentives for almost all actors in the system. Yeah, because this, if you have a sufficiently high carbon tax, then you have a drive towards many of the goals you just named, most prominently, of course, the climate goals, and that doesn't need a lot of intervention. Yeah, I'm a bit skeptical. I would, if possible, yeah, at least in my philosophy, you have as little interventions as possible, and you change the incentives so that the system moves in the direction you would like it to be. If you have hundreds or thousands of interventions you have to coordinate, you have to manage, then it might be complicated to actually get things done. Is there a kind of backbone in the strategies you contemplate where you have a few interventions that save, let's say, 60% of the problem and the rest is being done as you move along?
Okay, you probably are aware to get certain additional sectors into the ETS system. There's the project of the carbon border adjustment and so on. There are sustainability chapters in trade agreement to avoid that we import deforestation and things like this. So there's quite a lot. And again, it's not only the carbon, it's also the deforestation, which then leads through land use change to more carbon, but not in the EU because it's accounted in Brazil or elsewhere, but also the biodiversity loss. Deforestation is a brilliant example how the different dimensions of the pandemic, climate, biodiversity loss, health are all linked together. Now, having a higher carbon price in whatever form, I think is tremendously important to move forward. But yet again, I would be very careful to consider one single action as a silver bullet. Of course, it's again the search for simplicity and to have simple solutions which go very far. Just on this carbon border, just on a very high carbon price, how does this relate to climate justice equity considerations? If you look at the latest 2020 UNEP GAP report, and I think this is something which we have not yet reflected enough upon in our policies, maybe not even in research and innovation policy, because one of the things that research and innovation policy needs to do is also to anticipate the new issues which are maybe not sufficiently on the radar screen or which come up as new issues. If you look at the 2020 GAP report, there is now a chapter on lifestyles in conjunction with equity. And I just want to give you one quote where it says, okay, it's based on research by Oxfam. Estimates show that per capita consumption emissions of those in the global top 10% of income earners would need to be reduced to about 1/10 of their current level by 2030, and those of the top 1% by at least a factor of 30. Yes. While those of the poorest 50% could increase by around 3 times their current level. So what does this mean? Half of humanity can triple their emissions, but this half of humanity includes those hundreds of billions of people who have no toilets, no sanitation, who have no water, who have no electricity, who don't have their basic needs. So of course, there's a right to development. Of course, those people need to multiply the emissions. But then how are we going along? Because we tend to see overall averages, but the overall averages hides really how it goes for different population groups. And the 10% of the world population, what is this? This is about 750 million people. So this is many Europeans, but not all. This is many North Americans, but not all. This is basically the global elites, including in the emerging countries now and some in the developing countries. So those people, if they have to reduce to 1/10, this means reduce within the next 10 years by 90%, by 99.0%.
Yes.
What kind of carbon price would you need for those people that really polluting activities of the elites becomes expensive enough to really make them stop those polluting activities?
I mean, I would say, first of all, it's not just a global problem. We have the same problem within Europe. Yeah.
Yes.
That these carbon emissions are very unbalanced between income groups. Yeah? Again, the same pattern as you said. But just because you don't know that a carbon price, even if it's high, doesn't reduce all carbon emissions of the high income people, shouldn't prohibit you to go forward with carbon pricing. Yeah? If this is not helpful for the top 1%, then you might think or come up with other interventions to get them in line too. Mm. My worry would be that these top 10% are in very good positions to avoid being overly hit by a carbon tax or whatsoever, because they have a huge impact on political decision making. So this might be one reason why it's so difficult to get a sufficiently high carbon tax. Yeah, and it's obvious. It's obvious that the top 10% are emitting far too much, and that we have to compensate low-income groups if they are hit by environmental taxes or whatsoever.
Don't misunderstand me. I didn't mean I'm against carbon tax, but I just wanted to alert that it may not be the single silver bullet, that it is sometimes considered in a more market-based approach, believing sometimes that it will sort the issue by itself. It will not. It will probably need much more.
It's a logic step to do it. It's not the silver bullet that solves everything. But if you are able, as the top income group, it's the top 10%, to socialize the costs of your consumption patterns, then there is no argument that you should be able to keep on behaving like this. Yeah. This is totally logic. Yeah, and no economist, if he's sane, would just come forward with an argumentation that justifies this situation. Yeah. So if you have a rational policy approach, then you have to have carbon tax in one way or another. This to be sufficiently high to get rid of some of the externalities we are producing, and these externalities already favor one group more than proportionately. We have all those income and wealth inequalities, which are exactly linked to that topic as well. So we have more or less a few things that contribute to inequalities in various dimensions. So I don't want to advocate whatever carbon taxes, because this is simply too obvious. And it's definitely one thing you have to have in your agenda if you want to really, if you take the goals of the Green Deal seriously. At least that's my opinion. And also the carbon prices we are charging at the moment, I think they were close to 40 euros in February. This is far too low given the social cost that is caused by these emissions. Yeah? And if you don't work along these lines, I'm pretty sure that all the other activities are not going to change maybe the perception, but not the facts substantially, because we are fighting all the time with the rebound effect everywhere. Yeah. This is if you're more efficient because you've got an electric car, okay, that might trigger just more consumption somewhere else or more whatever. I don't know, but we are just confronted with a situation that we have a rebound effect if it comes to environmental issues, but this is more or less the effect that is driving consumption overall too.
No, we need a strong carbon price. This is very clear. But what else would we need? And yesterday there was an interesting new report from Cambridge Sustainability about 1.5% lifestyles, where they say, it was at the BBC, it was everywhere, you may have seen it, we really need to target the polluting elite. This is a taboo. This is a taboo in policies. And what kind of transformative research and innovation policy could help to find solutions to such tricky problems without falling into the trap of ideology? This is another maybe difficult task
Yes, but I mean, we could have individual carbon budgets, yeah, and then you could have a trading system if you would like to do that. Yeah. But actually, I think there is no, I don't know how you would argument that somebody can have more than 100-fold the emissions that you have or I have. Is there kind of a law or whatever that says that we can distribute carbon emissions that way just because somebody is wealthier? Does he have more rights to destroy the planet? Is that something that is written somewhere? If it's not written somewhere, then we can have a different system to allocate carbon emissions.
But de facto, it is like this currently. But this is a kind of a carbon supremacy, which is not justified by any means. Normally, all humans would be entitled to the same carbon budgets.
Yes.
But then you say now the same carbon budget for everybody, you come into another taboo, which is rationing. You ration the right to pollute somehow.
Actually, that's the raison d'etre of economists, I thought. Yeah, they are always dealing with scarcities. Yeah, so if we are having a carbon scarcity, then let's find systems that help us deal with them. And actually, my assessment is that we have all the technologies in place to solve the issue. And we might have to change some consumption patterns, but basically everything's here. We don't see any big missing links. All the renewable energies now have energy returns on investment that are comparable to fossil fuels. So everything's there to change the system. Yeah, there's no reason to have any taboos or to not involve this group or the other group. At least that's my point of view at the moment. Yeah. It might be different from a political point of view, but overall, we might also have to address these taboos.
Then another maybe taboo, another issue is sufficiency, frugality.
Yeah.
Should the promotion of sufficiency be part of a policy mix? Should we, because there are limits to circularity. Circularity, okay, we need to push the circular economy to its extreme.
Yes,
but without promoting, that certain products, they can't be entirely circular. So should we just simply also say, look, rethink, but then you move into worldviews, you move into values, you move into what is a beautiful life, you move into, and then you may need also to have a look at, if you look at the IPES report, the global assessment, they really had among their conclusions, one key conclusions as a lever for systemic change is new visions of what is a good life. Maybe people, indigenous people, what can we learn from other religions? What can we learn from other cultures? What can we learn from indigenous knowledge about their organization of life, about their, let's say, purpose in life? Are we stuck with our anthropocentric worldviews, or do we need to integrate much better humans as part of the overall web of life? But then we go very deeply into rethinking deep issues of values, of philosophy, of finally what is also making up Western culture in at least since modernity, if not longer. Is this something transformative research and innovation policy should look at? Is this also part of moving beyond naive innovation policies, or is this beyond the scope of what innovation should do? I think could go on and really find many new tricky questions. And,
maybe it's a compromise between being pragmatic to really make progress in some areas, but not to forget the big issues and the issues you just raised, which I think are well worth to be discussed and should be discussed more broadly than we are doing this at the moment. So very broad discussions. What did we miss? What haven't we not? What didn't we raise yet and should be raised?
What should be raised? Maybe I suppose you will not use the whole duration of the video, or will you use the whole duration? Will you?
Yeah, I would use it uncut. Yeah, basically.
Okay, but this is for a long time to listen for people.
Yes, maybe they find it interesting. Then they listen. Otherwise, they just stop listening after 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. I think maybe, and this should be the conclusion, we really should also look at the difficult experiences that sometimes have happened during COVID confinements, during the pandemic. Not that this is a desirable situation, not at all.
Yes.
But it has shown how fast things that before we thought could never change,
yes,
how fast they could change. So this capacity of fast change, how could this be used also for tipping points to transform forward towards more resilience and forward towards the better? How can we do this? And,
yes.
I think this deserves, a lot of reflection, a lot more reflection.
This is one thing. Also, some other things are really moving fast. Yeah, like renewable energies. I think they could have an exponential development as well if the framework is right. Like electromobility, electric cars, EVs, is something that is developing very fast too. And so we have things in our system that are changing rapidly. That gives hope, and maybe also the courage to make bold moves in other areas so that we really move forward. Yeah? But we have also seen, I think, that public interventions must also come to another level. The pandemic has shown this in various ways, that it's very difficult for for administrations, for the public sector to be an innovator. This is something new and to be up to speed with developments. And maybe this is part of the transformation, I guess, that you are doing at DGRTD. But this is, I guess, also something that is needed given the jobs ahead of us. Yeah. So, but I would like to stop here. I think we have covered really a lot of ground. And thank you for your time and your insights into matters, and for being open to these critical questions which I've raised during that discussion. So thanks a lot for being part of this interview.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. So